Alright, so we know since our circle has a center of negative 5, 6, that we can start to write our equation as x plus 5 squared plus y minus 6 squared. And they didn't hand us the radius, so I'm just going to write equals r squared. So remember, you have to change the sign, so it's negative 5, so x plus 5, y minus 6, we're good so far. So now if this point is supposed to be on our circle, it should make our equation true. So I'm going to plug in negative 1 for the x and 3 for the y, and that'll help me find what r is. So if I replace the x with negative 1, and if I replace the y with the 3, that should equal r squared. So I'll have 4 squared plus negative 3 squared equals r squared. So I have 16 plus 9 equals r squared. So 25 is r squared. And that's really all I need. I could go farther, take the square root, and say r is 5. But notice what I want is r squared. So if I simply replace that r squared with 25, I'll have the equation of my circle. So my final equation is going to be this thing. Oh, there it is. But instead of writing the r squared, I'm going to write what it equals, which is 25. And there it is. Looking good? Alright, so we'll do it again. So if our circle has a center of negative 4, negative 1, we can start writing our equation as x plus 4 squared plus y plus 1 squared, and we don't know r yet, so we'll leave it as r squared. We know if this point is on our circle, then when x is negative 2, the y should be 3. So I'm going to replace the x with a negative 2 and replace the y with a 3, and that should equal r squared. So I'll have 2 squared plus 4 squared equals r squared. So 4 plus 16 is r squared. So 20 is r squared. So if 20 is r squared, I can just replace that r squared with 20. And that is the equation that they're looking for. If you wanted to simply know the radius, you would take the square root of 20 and then you'd square it and you'd be right back there. Cool. So this one's a little bit different. They didn't hand us our center, but we know how to find a center. They told us the endpoints of the diameter, so the center is smack in between. The center is the midpoint. And we know how to find a midpoint. We can find the middle of the x's and then the middle of the y's. So the middle of the x's between negative 2 and 8, if you can average them, you can add them and divide by 2. So 6 divided by 2 is 3. So 3 is smack in between negative 2 and 8. You'll do the same thing for the y's. Smack in between 6 and 4, I can kind of tell is a 5, right? But if it were uglier, you would average them. You would add them up and divide by how many you had. And indeed, 10 divided by 2 is 5. So that's our center. So we can start to write our equation now just like we did before. We know x minus 3 squared plus y minus 5 squared equals our radius squared. And then when we choose our point, you can choose your favorite point. Doesn't matter which one of these you choose. I want to choose the one with positives. I want to make 8 the x and y the 4. So I'm going to substitute 8 for the x and 4 for the y, and that'll be r squared. So 25 plus 1 equals r squared. So 26 is r squared, so I'll just replace this r squared with 26, and that is the equation you've been looking for. Check.